The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of light and shadow. But some arrivals answer to no such binding. Some come from beyond even the Force's reach, summoned not by destiny, but by a being who considers destiny itself a plaything. Kamino's sky had never held a starship like this one. Rain lashed sideways in endless gray sheets, driven by winds that never stopped screaming across the endless ocean world. Beneath the clouds, spread across stilts driven into the churning sea, the cloning facilities of Tipoca City hummed with quiet purpose. Purpose that, in this timeline, had not yet been given a name. Master Ciphodias stood in a private chamber overlooking the storm, a data slate in his weathered hands. The order for an army of clones drafted and ready, waiting only for his signature. He never got the chance to give it. Above the clouds, space itself tore open, not with the shimmer of hyperspace, not with the ion trail of a Republic cruiser, but with a silent, absolute rupture, as though someone had simply decided reality would bend here. A starship fell through the breach, sleek, saucer-hulled, utterly unlike anything cataloged in the Jedi archives or the Trade Federation's most exhaustive intelligence files. Its running lights blinked steadily against the storm as it settled into a stable orbit, radiating a quiet hum of technology that belonged to no galaxy the locals had ever charted. Aboard the USS Voyager, Captain Catherine Janeway gripped the arms of her command chair as the viewscreen resolved from chaos into an alien world of endless water and lightning-veined clouds. "Report," she said, voice leveled despite the impossible transition her ship had just endured. "Structural integrity at 98%, Tuvok replied from tactical, his Vulcan calm a steady anchor in the sudden confusion. "Sensors are recalibrating. Whatever brought us here disrupted our navigational array, but propulsion, shields, and weapons are fully operational." "That's something," Chakotay said from beside her, studying the swirling world below on the screen. "Any idea where here is?" Before Tuvok could answer, the air on the bridge shimmered, not with a transporter effect, not with any energy signature Voyager's sensors recognized, but with the casual, theatrical flourish of something that considered physics a suggestion. A figure in a Starfleet admiral's uniform appeared mid-stride, hands clasped behind his back, wearing the insufferable smile Janeway had learned to dread across a decade of service. "Hugh," she said flatly. "Kathy," he beamed, spreading his arms as if presenting a gift. "Welcome to a galaxy far, far away. Literally. I do love a bit of theater. What have you done? Saved you from years of tedious Delta Quadrant wandering. For one thing." Hugh strolled toward the viewscreen, gesturing at the storm-racked ocean world below with theatrical grandeur. "This is Kamino. Right now, somewhere down there. A rather serious Jedi Master is about to sign a rather serious order. One that creates an army of slaves bred for war, an army that will, in time, become the instrument of a galactic empire's iron fist. Trillions of lives, Catherine. Freedoms extinguished. A republic strangled in its sleep. By a man wearing kindly robes. And a fatherly smile." Janeway's jaw tightened. "And you want us to stop it?" "I want to see what you'll do." Hugh's smile sharpened at the edges. Something colder beneath the theater. "You've spent your whole career preaching non-interference. Captain, the sacred prime directive. Your precious continuum of self-righteous restraint. Now I'm handing you a galaxy already broken, already bleeding toward tyranny, and asking, will you still hide behind your rules? Or will you finally act like the woman I know you to be?" "This isn't a game, Hugh. Everything is a game, my dear. But this one has stakes even you should appreciate." His expression flickered, just for a moment, into something almost solemn. "You will remain in this galaxy until the crisis is resolved. The Clone Order. The woman who rules Mandalore in defiance of her own people's warlike nature. And the serpent coiled in the Republic's Senate wearing the face of a humble statesman. Solve it, Captain, and I will return your ship to Earth myself. Not a second lost. Your Delta Quadrant nightmare will simply end. And if we refuse," Hugh's smile returned, thin and knowing, "then you'll simply have a very long, very wet stay on this miserable ocean world. Your choice." He vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared, the air rippling shut behind him. Silence held the bridge for a long moment. "Captain," Tuvok said. Carefully, sensors have identified the vessel's location definitively. We are approximately 300 kilometers above a cloning facility of considerable scale. Life signs are extensive. Long-range scans detect additional signatures consistent with what our historical database, cross-referenced against Q's interference, would classify as a starfaring civilization entirely unknown to Starfleet. Janeway rose slowly from her chair, eyes fixed on the storm below, on the city of stilts and rain that held the seed of an empire's birth. Harry, hail the surface. Peaceful intentions, standard first contact protocol. She paused, feeling the weight of what Q had handed her, not a mystery to solve, but a future to rewrite. Chakotay, a symbol of a away team. If Q's telling the truth, somewhere down there a good man is about to make the worst mistake of his life. We're going to talk him out of it. And if talking doesn't work? Chakotay asked quietly. Janeway's eyes didn't leave the view screen. Then we find another way. We didn't survive the Delta Quadrant by giving up when the rules got complicated. The rain kept falling on Kamino, indifferent to the silent ship in its orbit, indifferent to the history now trembling on the edge of change. Master Ciphodias felt the disturbance before he heard the comm chime. It rippled through the force like a stone, dropped into still water, not malevolent, not threatening, but undeniably wrong in a way that made the hair on his arms rise. He set down the data slate bearing the clone army authorization, his stylus hovering above the signature line, and turned toward the rain-streaked window of his chamber. Something had entered the system, something the force itself seemed to hold its breath around. The comm chimed. Master Ciphodias. Came the voice of Lama Su, the tall, elegant, Kaminoan Prime Minister. We have detected an unregistered vessel in high orbit. It matches no known configuration in our database. It is hailing us. Patch it through, Ciphodias said, setting the data slate aside. The voice that answered was calm, measured, and utterly unfamiliar, a woman's voice, carrying an authority that reminded him, oddly, of certain senior Jedi masters he'd known. This is Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. We mean no harm. We request permission to send a shuttle to the surface for direct communication. We have urgent information regarding a decision currently under consideration by a Master Ciphodias. The Jedi Master went very still. No one outside the Council knew of his errand to Kamino. No one alive should have known his name at all, let alone the purpose of his visit. Permission granted, he said slowly, exchanging a wary glance with Lama Su through the comm relay. I will meet them myself. The shuttle, small, boxy, and humming with technology, that made the Kaminoan engineers who inspected its hull murmur excitedly to one another. Touched down on a landing platform, slick with rain. Janeway descended first, flanked by Chakotay and Tuvok, her uniform a stark contrast against Kamino's gray, waterlogged architecture. She had faced board cubes and species 8472 without flinching. She would not let an alien world of endless ocean unsettle her now. Ciphodias approached with the careful, watchful bearing of a man who had spent decades reading danger in a stranger's posture. He found none in these three, only a tightly coiled purpose that unsettled him more than open hostility would have. You are not of any species or government known to the Republic, he said, cutting straight to the point, one hand resting near his lightsaber, hilt out of long habit, rather than expectation of violence. No, Janeway agreed. We're a very long way from home, Master Ciphodias. Further than you can likely imagine. We were brought here against our will, by an entity whose motives remain complicated. But he gave us information I believe you need to hear before you finish what you came to Kamino to do. The Jedi Master's expression didn't change, but Tuvok, watching closely, noted the almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. You know why I am here. You're here to commission a clone army, Chakotay said, on the authority of a deceased Jedi Master named Ciphodias. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the relentless drum of rain against the platform. I am Ciphodias, the Jedi said carefully. I am very much alive. Not for much longer, Janeway said, and there was no cruelty in it, only grim certainty. According to what we've been told, you will be murdered, betrayed by someone you trust, someone using your name and your authority to set events in motion that will unmake the Republic you're sworn to protect. The army you're about to order isn't for the Republic's defense. It's the foundation of an empire, one built on manufactured loyalty, hidden triggers, and the deaths of nearly every Jedi in this galaxy. Ciphodias took an involuntary step back, his hand finally closing around his lightsaber hilt, not in threat, but as an anchor against the vertigo of what he was hearing. You claim to know the future. We claim to have been shown a future, Tuvok corrected precisely, by a being of considerable power and questionable ethics, who has placed our vessel and crew in this galaxy until certain events are resolved. We have no reason to deceive you, Master Jedi. We have every reason to prevent a catastrophe none of us asked to witness. Ciphodias' gaze moved between the three strangers, weighing them the way he might weigh a testimony given under the Force's own scrutiny. He had spent his life learning to sense deception, manipulation, the subtle currents of the dark side. He felt none of that here, only conviction, and beneath it, something that unsettled him more, genuine grief, worn like an old wound on Janeway's face. If what you say is true, he said slowly, then the order for this army must not be given. Not by me, not in secret, not without the Council's full knowledge. That's the beginning, Janeway said. Not the end. Whoever intends to use your name and authority will find another way if this path is closed to them. We need to understand who benefits from an army no one asked for, and why. Ciphodias looked down at the data slate in his hand, at the signature line still empty, and made his decision. Then you will accompany me to Coruscant. The Council must hear this, however difficult it may be to believe. Behind them, Lama Su watched the exchange with cool, calculating patience, already composing the message he intended to send elsewhere. A habit of caution the Kaminoans had never abandoned, and one that would prove, in time, to matter more than anyone standing on that rain-swept platform yet realized. The storm showed no sign of breaking. Neither, Janeway suspected, had the true storm even begun. The shuttle ride back to Voyager was quiet, the kind of quiet that came before an argument everyone knew was coming. Janeway waited until they were in her ready room, door sealed. The storm of Kamino reduced to a gray smear on the small viewport, before she let out the breath she'd been holding since the platform. You disagree with my decision, she said, not looking at Tuvok, who stood with his hands clasped behind his back in his usual posture of restrained calculation. I have not stated a position, Captain. You didn't have to. She turned, arms crossed. Say it. Tuvok inclined his head slightly. We have, within the span of an hour, revealed the existence of a technologically superior civilization to a species we know nothing about, disclosed classified knowledge of a future, betrayal to a man who has not yet been murdered, and agreed to accompany him to the capital of a governing body whose laws, customs, and internal politics remain entirely unknown to us. Every action we have taken is, by the standards of the Prime Directive, a violation. The Prime Directive was written for a Federation exploring space. Tuvok, not for a crew, dropped into another galaxy by an omnipotent being who's made our departure contingent on fixing what he broke. With respect, Captain, Hugh did not break anything. According to his own account, this future already existed before our arrival. Our departure is contingent on our willingness to alter history, a history that is not ours to alter. The door chimed. Chakotay entered without waiting for a response, clearly having heard enough through the bulkhead to know where the conversation stood. For what it's worth, I'm with Tuvok. Not about the ethics, about the risk. We don't know these people. We don't know their laws, their wars, or what happens if word spreads that a starship full of aliens is handing out prophecies to Jedi Masters. So what would you have me do? Janeway's voice sharpened. Sit here in orbit and watch that army get built anyway? Watch billions of clones raised for slaughter. Watch a republic collapse into a dictatorship because some rule written for first contact with pre-warp civilizations says we shouldn't interfere. I would have you consider, Tuvok said evenly, that we do not yet know the full shape of the harm we might cause by acting. Ciphodias may be killed regardless of what we tell him. The clones may be created by another hand. We have seen one thread of a vast tapestry, Captain, and we are already pulling at it. Janeway was silent for a long moment. the truth of it settling uncomfortably in her chest. She had faced impossible choices before: the caretaker's array, the assimilation of her own crew, choices that cost lives no matter which way she turned. But those choices had at least been hers to own. Consequences she could trace back to her own hand on the helm. This felt different. This felt like being handed a knife and told to carve a galaxy's fate before it had finished forming. "Q didn't give us a choice to stay neutral," she said finally. "He gave us a cage with 2 doors. Act or rot here until we do. I won't gamble my crew's lives on the hope that doing nothing is somehow the safer path. Not when we've already seen where nothing leads." "Then let us at least act with caution," Tuvok said. "Gather intelligence before we commit further. We do not yet know who orchestrated Ciphodias' death in the future we were shown, nor why. Revealing too much, too quickly, risks alerting that party before we understand the shape of the threat." Janeway considered this, then nodded slowly. "Agreed. We tell the Council only what's necessary to prevent the clone order, not everything Q showed us. We watch, we learn, and we move only when we understand the board we're playing on." Chakotay allowed himself a small, tired smile. "For what it's worth, Catherine, I think you're doing the right thing. I just want us to survive doing it." "So do I," she admitted. The comm chirped. "Captain," came Harry Kim's voice. "Master Ciphodias is requesting we prepare for departure to Coruscant. He says the Council convenes within the day, and he'd rather present this himself before rumors reach the wrong ears." "Understood, Harry. Tell him we'll be ready within the hour." Janeway closed the channel and looked between her 2 most trusted officers. "For the record, I don't like this any more than either of you. But Q made his intentions clear. We finish this, or we stay here forever. I'd rather bend a rule written for a galaxy we've never risked losing everything, and then watch trillions of lives be spent building someone else's empire." Tuvok said nothing further, though something in his expression suggested he had not fully surrendered his reservations, only set them aside for the moment. The way a Vulcan set aside anger, not extinguished, merely contained. Outside the viewport, Kamino's storm continued its endless churn, indifferent to the quiet war of conscience being waged within the ship orbiting above it. Somewhere below, Lama Su's message was already speeding toward Coruscant through channels Voyager's sensors had not yet learned to track. A warning sent not out of malice, but out of the same cold pragmatism that had built an army for a war no one had yet declared. The Council would hear Ciphodias' account soon enough, but they would not be the only ones listening. Coruscant rose from the black of space like a jewel, wrapped in 1,000 years of ambition, a planet-spanning city whose towers pierced the clouds and whose depths no living being had fully charted. Voyager's arrival in high orbit drew immediate attention. Comm chatter from Republic Traffic Control, a scramble of security cruisers, and within minutes, a formal escort of Jedi starfighters that flanked the alien ship with wary precision. "They fly well," Tom Paris observed from the helm, watching the sleek fighters hold formation, despite having no reference for Voyager's configuration or capabilities. "Nervous, though? Watch the spacing. They're keeping distance for a fast break. If we do something stupid." "Wise of them," Janeway murmured. Ciphodias had insisted on riding with the Jedi escort rather than remaining aboard Voyager for the approach, a decision, he'd explained, that would ease the Council's suspicion. Better they see a Jedi Master returning under his own power than an unknown vessel delivering him like cargo. Janeway had agreed, though it left her keenly aware of how thin the thread of trust between them truly was. The Jedi Temple's landing platform had been cleared for Voyager's shuttle. A courtesy, Janeway suspected, that came with an equal measure of caution. For Jedi awaited them, a tall, dark-skinned man with a calm, appraising gaze. A diminutive green being whose presence in the Force felt like standing too near a sun. A stern woman with cropped dark hair. And Ciphodias himself, his expression unreadable. "Captain Janeway," the tall Jedi said, inclining his head with measured respect. "I am Mace Windu, of the Jedi Council. This is Master Yoda, Master Adigalia, and you already know Master Ciphodias. He has told us a great deal." "Then you understand why we're here," Janeway said. "Understand, we do not," Yoda said, his voice a low, rumbling contradiction of his small frame. Believe we are inclined. Feel your presence in the Force, unusual it is. Like a stone dropped in still water, disturbing all it touches. But deceive us, your presence does not. Truth, I sense in you, Captain. Troubling truth. We'd like to hear it directly, Windu said. In full. Not secondhand. They convened in a chamber Janeway hadn't expected, not the grand council spire she'd glimpsed rising above the temple's central tower, but a smaller, more private room. Its windows shuttered against the city's endless glow. She understood the caution immediately. Whatever she said here would not yet be shared with the full council. Not until its truth, or danger, was better understood. She laid it out plainly. The being called Q. The clone army, meant to serve a war not yet declared. The Republic's slow strangulation at the hands of someone hiding in plain sight, wearing a statesman's smile while orchestrating a fall that would take 1,000 years to fully unwind. She held back only the deepest specifics, Palpatine's name, the shape of the empire to come, mindful of Tuvok's caution, wary of revealing more than the moment required. Windu's expression darkened with each detail. Adi Gallia's arms folded tighter across her chest. Only Yoda remained still, eyes half-lidded, as though listening to something beneath. Janeway's words rather than the words themselves. A being of considerable power, Yoda finally said, who moves ships across galaxies, who shows futures unmade. This troubles me more than the futures themselves. Captain, trust such power freely given, we should not. I don't trust him either, Janeway admitted. But whether or not I trust Q, the danger he's described feels real. And I've learned not to dismiss a threat simply because I dislike the messenger. The clone order, Windu said, steering the conversation back with the focus of a man unwilling to be distracted by cosmic mysteries when a concrete danger sat before him. If it is not commissioned, what then? Does the Republic go to war unprepared? Or does this threat you describe simply find another instrument? That's what we don't yet know, Janeway said honestly. But an army bred in secret, its loyalty engineered rather than earned, feels less like a defense and more like a knife handed to whoever holds the hilt. I'd rather the Republic find its strength through allies who choose to fight beside it, not slaves who have no choice at all. Silence settled over the chamber. Windu exchanged a long look with Yoda, some unspoken debate passing between them in the language of decades of shared judgment. Halt the clone order. We will, Yoda said finally. But watch closely, we must, what fills its absence. A war brewing. I sense already, clouded, the future is. More than I have felt in many years. Darkness gathers, Captain Janeway. Whether your arrival lifts that darkness or deepens it, uncertain, I remain. Then let us work together to find out, Janeway said. I didn't come here to conquer your galaxy, Master Yoda. I came here because I was given no other choice. And because trillions of lives are worth the risk of trying. Windu studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his guarded eyes. The council will need to know more, eventually. But for now, this stays among those in this room and Ciphodias. Agreed, agreed, Janeway said, and felt, for the first time since Kamino's storm-racked skies, the faint and fragile shape of an alliance beginning to form. One built not on destiny, but on choice. Outside the shuttered windows, Coruscant's endless lights burned on, indifferent to the quiet decision made in its shadow, a decision that had, somewhere far below in the Senate district, already cost someone their carefully laid plans. Sundari's domed skyline gleamed beneath Mandalore's pale sun, a city of crystalline spires rising from a world its own people had scorched barren generations. Before through wars none of them now, living could fully remember. It was Chakotay thought as their shuttle descended through the atmospheric shield. A strange kind of beauty, elegance built atop the bones of catastrophe. Voyager had remained in high orbit above Coruscant while Janeway pursued quieter channels of information. This errand belonged to Chakotay and 7 of 9, dispatched on Ciphodias' quiet recommendation. If war is coming, the Jedi Master had told them before they departed, it will touch Mandalore first. The Duchess walks a narrower blade than she knows. Duchess Satine cries. Receive them in a chamber of pale stone and flowing water features. Her expression composed but her eyes sharp with the particular wariness of a ruler who had learned, through hard experience, that visitors rarely came without cost. Strangers from beyond known space, she said, studying them both with open curiosity, poorly concealed beneath formal poise. Master Ciphodias vouches for you, which is either the highest recommendation Mandalore could receive, or the strangest joke a Jedi has played in 1,000 years. We're not here to joke, Duchess, Chakotay said. We're here because we believe. Your world stands at the edge of a war it hasn't yet been told is coming. Satine's composure flickered, not surprise. Seven noted with clinical precision, but recognition. Death Watch, she said quietly. You know of them. We know a name, Seven said. And we know that whatever conflict brews within your borders will not remain contained to them. The being who brought us to this galaxy showed us a future in which your pacifism is tested by forces that do not share your restraint. My pacifism is tested daily, Satine said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice as she rose and moved to the wide window overlooking Sundari's gleaming towers. My own cousin, Pre-Vizsla, commands warriors who believe peace is a weakness bred into Mandalore by cowards. He would see the old ways restored, Beskar and blood. War as a birthright rather than a scar to be healed. I have spent my life proving that a Mandalore built on unity and restraint can survive. I will not abandon that vision, because two strangers claim to have glimpsed a darker future. We're not asking you to abandon it, Chakotay said. We're asking you to prepare for the possibility that restraint alone may not be enough to protect it. Satine turned back to face them, and for a moment the composed ruler gave way to something rawer, exhaustion, perhaps, or the particular loneliness of leading a people who did not fully believe in the peace she'd built for them. You speak as though war is inevitable. I have spent every year of my reign trying to prove it is not. In the future we witnessed, Seven said, with the blunt honesty that made most diplomats wince. A war does come to this galaxy, one that consumes systems far beyond Mandalore's borders, whether your world burns within it or stands as an example of what peace can survive, depends on choices not yet made. We do not know if your path can be changed. We know only that ignorance of the danger guarantees nothing but its arrival unchallenged. Satine was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting back to the window, to the crystalline spires that had cost her people so much to build, atop the ashes of their old, warlike ways. Pre-Vizsla grows bolder each season, she admitted finally. His rhetoric spreads among the young, who know nothing of the wars that scarred this world and everything of the glory songs sung about them. I have tried reason. I have tried compromise. Neither has slowed him. Then perhaps, Chakotay offered carefully, it's time to try something else, not abandoning your principles, but strengthening the ability to defend them. A Mandalore that can protect its peace is stronger than one that can only hope its enemies show restraint. It doesn't require of itself. You sound like Obi-Wan, Satine said, and something almost like a smile touched her lips before fading. A Jedi who once tried to convince me that a blade can serve peace as readily as war, if wielded by the right hand. Wise man, Seven observed. Overly earnest, Satine corrected, though the fondness in her voice was unmistakable. She straightened, decision settling over her like armor donned out of necessity rather than desire. I will not raise an army, Commander Chakotay. That is not who I am, nor who I wish Mandalore to become. But I will listen to intelligence, to warning, to whatever your strange ship and stranger benefactor can offer that helps me see Vizsla's next move before he makes it. That much, I owe my people. That's all we're asking, Chakotay said, as their shuttle lifted back through Sundari's atmospheric shield. Seven turned her attention to the sensor readings scrolling across her display, faint energy, signatures registering from the planets, uninhabited wastes beyond the city's dome, signatures that matched, with unsettling precision, the profile of a growing paramilitary force training in secret. Death Watch is already stronger than the Duchess believes, Seven said quietly. Then we'd better make sure Voyager's intelligence reaches her before Vizsla's blade does, Chakotay replied, watching Sundari's beautiful, fragile skyline shrink behind them into the pale Mandalorian sky. The doctor had never expected to find himself fascinated by politics. But then, he reflected, he had never expected to find Himself in a galaxy where a hologram of a benevolent statesman could conceal something far older and far colder beneath its practiced warmth. Fascinating, he murmured, studying the data scrolling across the medical bay's secondary display, repurposed, at Seven's suggestion, into an analytical station for the Mountain of Republic Senate. Records Janeway had quietly requested, through Ciphodias' diplomatic channels. 7. Come look at this voting pattern. 7 of 9 crossed the medical bay, her enhanced ocular implant, already parsing the data faster than the display could render it for human eyes. Senator Palpatine of Naboo, she read aloud. 18 years of Senate tenure. Voting record shows consistent advocacy for military expansion bills, consistently paired with equally consistent public statements decrying the Republic's growing bureaucratic paralysis. A man who publicly laments the very dysfunction his votes help create. The doctor said, "How remarkably convenient." There is more. Seven's fingers moved across the console, cross-referencing records, with the quiet efficiency of a mind built for pattern recognition beyond human capacity. Trade disputes involving Naboo have increased sharply in correlation with Palpatine's rise to prominence. The Trade Federation blockade that catalyzed his ascension to Chancellor in the timeline queue described it did not occur in isolation. Financial records, heavily obscured through shell transactions, suggest indirect funding connections between Naboo senatorial accounts and Trade Federation subsidiaries. He funded the crisis that made him chancellor. The doctor said slowly, the full shape of it settling into place with the particular horror of a diagnosis confirmed after a long, dreadful suspicion, manufactured the very disease he then rode into power curing. The pattern extends further, Seven continued, cross-referencing separatist movement. Leadership, Count Dooku's public departure from the Jedi Order occurred 11 months after a private meeting with Palpatine, undocumented in any official Senate record but referenced obliquely in Dooku's own correspondence, which our censors were able to recover from an intercepted diplomatic pouch. During our approach to Coruscant, the doctor straightened, the analytical thrill of discovery giving way to something graver. He's building both sides of a war that hasn't started yet. The Republic's army and the separatist rebellion, orchestrated by the same hand, for the same ultimate purpose. Consolidation of absolute power through manufactured crisis, Seven said. A pattern, she added, with the faint, dry precision that passed for dark humor in her limited emotional register, not unlike the Borg's own method of expansion. Assimilate the resistance by ensuring you control both what it resists and what it becomes. I'll pretend I didn't hear you compare a Sith Lord to the collective, the doctor said, though I confess the comparison is not without merit. They brought their findings to Janeway in the ready room, where she listened with the particular stillness she reserved for information that confirmed a fear rather than resolved one. Tuvok stood at her side, arms folded, absorbing the data with characteristic composure. That did little to mask the gravity beneath it. If this is accurate, Tuvok said, Palpatine's plan does not depend on the clone army specifically. It depends on crisis, any crisis, sufficient to justify the Senate granting him extraordinary powers. Preventing the clone order removes one instrument. It does not remove the architect. Then we need proof, Janeway said. Not suspicion, not pattern analysis. Proof the Council and the Senate can act on. Evidence strong enough to expose a sitting senator before he can maneuver his way into the chancellorship at all. Obtaining such proof will be considerably more difficult than analyzing historical patterns. The doctor cautioned. Palpatine, or Sidious, or whatever name he answers to in private, has spent nearly 2 decades ensuring his hands remain clean. Every thread we've found is circumstantial, suggestive, but not conclusive. Then we get closer, Janeway said. 7. I want continued surveillance on every transaction, every meeting, every scrap of correspondence connected to Palpatine's office. Tuvok, work with Master Windu carefully to determine if the Jedi have resources capable of force-based verification that might succeed, where our censors can't. There is a risk in proceeding cautiously, Captain, Tuvok observed. Every day we spend gathering proof is a day Palpatine spins advancing plans we do not yet fully understand. I'm aware, Janeway said, jaw tight. But move too fast, accuse a beloved senator without airtight proof. And we hand him exactly the sympathetic narrative. He'd need to accelerate his own rise. We only get one chance to expose him before he learns we're watching. I intend to make it count. Outside the viewport, Coruscant's endless city lights blinked on into evening, oblivious to the quiet war being waged in data streams and shadowed inference far above its towers. A war whose outcome would determine whether the galaxy's slow slide toward tyranny could still be arrested, or whether Hugh's chosen instruments had already arrived too late to do more than watch it unfold. The distress call reached Voyager in the dead of Coruscant's artificial night, a garbled, static-choked transmission, relayed through Republic communication buoys from a source that took Harry Kim nearly 4 minutes to trace. It's Mandalore, he said, voice tight as he worked the console. Sundari's outer defense perimeter. Someone's hit their power relay stations. Multiple simultaneous strikes. Coordinated. Duchess Cries is requesting any assistance the Republic can spare, but the Republic's response time to a neutral system will be measured in days, not hours. Janeway finished grimly. She was already moving toward the turbolift. Tom, plot an emergency course to Mandalore. B'Elanna, I want defensive systems ready before we arrive. This isn't our fight by treaty. But I won't watch a world burn because bureaucracy moves slower than sabotage. Voyager dropped out of warp above, Mandalore into a scene of controlled chaos. Sundari's crystalline spires still standing, but the city's outer shield flickering erratically where Deathwatch strike teams had crippled key relay stations along the planet's northern wastes. Local security forces, lightly armed and unaccustomed to organized paramilitary assault, were being pushed back from a critical power junction that, if lost entirely, would plunge half the capital into darkness and leave it defenseless against whatever Pre-Vizsla intended next. Tom, get us a shuttle down there, Janeway ordered. B'Elanna, Harry, you're with him. Defensive support only. I want that relay station protected. Not a war started. B'Elanna Torres had fought the Cardassians, the Kazon, the Borg, and half a dozen other threats across 2 quadrants of known space. But nothing quite prepared her for the sight of armored Mandalorian warriors descending on jetpacks through Sundari's smoke-choked skies, blaster fire crisscrossing between makeshift barricades where local defenders fought with a courage that far outmatched their training. Tom, get us down behind that ridge, she called over the shuttle's rising engine whine. Harry, force field generators in the aft compartment. We're not here to shoot our way through. We're here to buy these people time to hold the line. The shuttle set down hard behind a scorched rock formation, 200 meters from the relay station, and Torres was out the hatch before the engines fully cycled down, hauling the portable force field generator across her shoulder while blaster bolts scored the air overhead with a sound like tearing fabric. Local commander, she shouted, spotting a Mandalorian officer in scorched, unmarked armor directing the defense from behind an overturned transport. I've got a mobile shield generator that can cover your relay station. Buy you 30 minutes to reroute power and get your people clear. The officer, a woman, judging by the voice, through the vocoder, turned, with a wary glance that softened only slightly at the sight of unfamiliar, but clearly capable technology. You're the off-worlders the Duchess mentioned. Fine. I don't care where you're from if you can stop them from taking that junction. Torres worked fast, driving the generator's anchor spikes into scorched rock while Harry Kim covered her with a phaser rifle set to heavy stun, dropping 2 approaching Death Watch fighters without lethal force, a decision Torres noted with grim approval even as blaster fire chewed the ground around them. Fields up, she shouted, slamming the activation control. A shimmering dome of amber energy snapped into existence around the relay station, absorbing a barrage of blaster bolts with a sound like hail on a tin roof. The Death Watch strike team faltered, regrouping at a distance as their weapons proved suddenly inexplicably useless against the barrier. That's new, the Mandalorian commander said, genuine surprise cutting through her professional composure. 30 minutes, Torres reminded her. Get your engineers on that reroute. This shield won't hold forever, and I'd rather not find Out what happens when Death Watch brings something heavier than blasters to test it. The reprieve held. Local engineers worked with desperate speed under the shield's protection, rerouting power through secondary conduits while Death Watch, unable to breach the barrier and unwilling to commit to a prolonged siege against reinforcements of unknown strength, withdrew into the wastes as suddenly as they'd struck. A tactical retreat. Not a defeat, but enough to save the junction and the district it powered. Tom Paris found Torres afterward, surveying the scorched battlefield, with the particular exhaustion of adrenaline finally ebbing. Command's going to want a full report on how Federation tech just saved half of Sundari's power grid from a Mandalorian civil war. Command's going to want a lot of things, Torres said, wiping soot from her brow. Right now I just want to know how long we can keep bailing out a fight that isn't ours, before it becomes exactly that. Overhead, Sundari's shield flickered back to full strength, the crystalline spires gleaming once more beneath. A sky still hazy with smoke, a fragile victory, bought with technology from a galaxy away, in a war that, Torres suspected grimly, had only just begun to show its teeth. The summons came 3 days after Mandalore, delivered not through Ciphodias' now familiar diplomacy, but through a formal council communique that left little room for negotiation. Captain Janeway would appear before the full Jedi Council, not the quiet gathering of four that had first heard her out. They know more than we told them, Tuvok observed as their shuttle descended toward the temple's central spire, or they suspected. A formal summons of this nature suggests the Council's patience for partial disclosure has reached its limit. Then we give them what they need, Janeway said. Not everything, but enough to keep this alliance from fracturing before it's had a chance to matter. The council chamber was nothing like the shuttered room of their first meeting, a circular hall ringed, with tall windows overlooking Coruscant's endless skyline. 12 seats occupied by Jedi masters whose collective presence in the Force, even Janeway's untrained senses could tell, radiated a gravity that pressed against the room like a held breath. Captain Janeway, Mace Windu said without preamble, 3 days ago. A Mandalorian relay station was defended by weapons and shielding technology no catalogued civilization in this galaxy possesses. Duchess Kryze has filed a formal report, crediting your vessel's crew with preventing what could have become an open civil war. The Council would like to understand precisely how deeply your knowledge of this galaxy's future extends, and precisely how much of it you have chosen not to share with us. There was no hostility in Windu's voice, only the flat, unyielding demand of a man who had spent his life distrusting convenient allies who arrived with secrets intact. Everything I've shared with you has been true, Janeway said, meeting his gaze without flinching. What I've withheld, I withheld out of caution, not deception. There is a threat in this galaxy I believe to be more dangerous than the clone army we prevented. A figure of considerable political power, whose identity, if exposed prematurely and without proof, could do more harm than good. A name, Windu pressed. Give us a name, Captain, and let the Council judge for itself what constitutes premature. Janeway hesitated, one heartbeat, long enough for Yoda's ancient eyes to narrow with something like understanding. Afraid? You are, Yoda said quietly. That naming this danger changes nothing, except to warn it that it is seen. Yes, Janeway admitted. We believe this. Individual has spent decades ensuring his hands remain clean of every crisis he orchestrates. If we name him now, without proof strong enough to survive scrutiny, he will simply adapt, bury the evidence deeper, or accelerate a plan we don't yet fully understand. I'd rather move once decisively than tip our hand and lose the only advantage foreknowledge has given us. Adi Gallia leaned forward. And if this figure moves against the Republic before your proof is gathered, how many more Mandalores will your caution cost, Captain? Before Janeway could answer, the air at the chamber's center rippled, not with the Force, not with any energy the assembled Jedi recognized, but with the same casual, reality-bending flourish that had first announced Hugh's presence on Voyager's bridge. Several council members rose instantly, hands moving toward lightsaber hilts, only to freeze as the figure that coalesced before them radiated a presence that made even Yoda's ancient senses recoil with wary recognition. Something vast and old, and entirely unbound by the Force's ordinary laws. "Oh, don't strain yourselves," Hugh said, glancing around the chamber with theatrical disdain. "I'm not here to fight a room full of glorified space monks. I'm here to remind the good captain of the terms of our arrangement, and perhaps offer you all a bit of perspective you sorely lack." "Who?" Windu demanded. "Are you?" "Someone considerably older, more powerful, and infinitely more entertained by your galaxy's petty squabbles than you'd find comfortable, Master Windu." Hugh's gaze swept the council with something between amusement and contempt. "Captain, Janeway is playing a longer game than your impatience allows for. And frankly, I find her caution, for once, rather sound. Move too fast, and your serpent slithers deeper into shadow. Move too slow, and he strikes before you're ready. It's really quite the delicious dilemma, isn't it?" "You brought her here," Yoda said slowly. "Interfered, you have, with the natural unfolding of events." "I interfered," Hugh said, "because your natural unfolding was heading toward an ending even. I found distasteful, and believe me, my tolerance for distaste is considerable. I've given the captain until this crisis resolves to prove whether mortals, human, Jedi, or otherwise, are capable of choosing something better than the path they were already walking. Don't waste her time with council theatrics. Time, unlike patience, is not infinite, even for me." He vanished as abruptly as he'd arrived, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Windu turned back to Janeway slowly, something reassessed behind his guarded eyes. "You did not choose this burden." "No," Janeway said, "but I intend to carry it regardless. Give me time to gather proof, Master Windu. I won't waste it, and I won't let another Mandalore happen if I can help it." Yoda studied her for a long moment, the ancient weight of his gaze settling like a verdict. "Time, we will give you, Captain, but watching, we will be closely." The proof, when it finally came, arrived not through sensors or Seven's tireless data analysis, but through an old-fashioned act of desperation from a man who had spent 11 months questioning the choice that had led him away from the Jedi Order. Count Dooku's private request for an audience with Captain Janeway came through Ciphodias, delivered with a caution that suggested even the messenger didn't fully trust its contents. They met in a secure chamber aboard Voyager, shielded against every form of surveillance Seven and B'Elanna could devise. Dooku's aristocratic bearing doing little to conceal the exhaustion of a man carrying a secret too heavy to hold alone any longer. "I left the Order believing I served a cause greater than its dogma," Dooku said without preamble, seated stiffly across from Janeway in the dim light. "I have since come to understand I was, in truth, a tool sharpened for another man's war. My master, for that is what he is, whatever title he wears in public, intends to plunge this galaxy into a conflict, engineered from its first spark to its last, all to seize power the Republic would never willingly surrender." "Your master," Janeway said carefully. "Say the name, Count." Dooku's jaw tightened, the weight of 11 months of complicity pressing visibly against his composure. "Darth Sidious, known to the Senate, to the Republic, to the galaxy at large, as Sheev Palpatine." The confirmation, spoken aloud by a man who had trained beneath the Sith Lord's own hand, was the final thread Seven's analysis had needed, combined with recovered financial records, intercepted correspondence, and now Dooku's own testimony. The pattern that had haunted the doctor's medical bay analysis for weeks resolved into something no longer circumstantial. He plans to activate a contingency should his position ever be threatened. Dooku continued. A crisis on Naboo, a Trade Federation blockade already in motion, meant to catapult him toward the chancellorship on a wave of manufactured sympathy. If your interference has delayed his timeline, he will accelerate this contingency rather than abandon it. When? Janeway asked, already rising. Days, perhaps hours. Now that his clone army has been denied him, he will not wait for another opportunity to present itself. Janeway wasted no time. Within the hour, Windu, Yoda, and a hastily assembled council delegation stood aboard Voyager reviewing Dooku's testimony alongside Seven's exhaustive evidence trail, proof enough, finally, to act. "We move on the Senate tonight," Windu said grimly. Before he can trigger his contingency, they found Palpatine in his private office overlooking the Senate district. The warm, fatherly demeanor the galaxy knew intact right up until the moment Windu's lightsaber ignited and the assembled Jedi made clear that pretense no longer served any purpose. Chancellor Candidate Palpatine, Windu said, voice like Durasteel. You are under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and crimes against the Republic you claim to serve. For a long moment, Palpatine said nothing, his expression unreadable in the room's low light. Then, slowly, something in his posture shifted. The kindly statesman's mask dissolving into something colder, older, and infinitely more dangerous. Yellow bleeding into eyes that had spent decades hiding their true nature behind careful restraint. You have no idea, Sidious said, voice dropping into a register that carried the weight of genuine power long suppressed. What you have just cost this galaxy by acting too soon. Lightning arced from his fingertips before the last word left his mouth. Pure, crackling malevolence that Windu barely deflected with a raised hand. The council chamber's warded walls groaning under. The force of power unleashed without restraint for the first time in decades. Janeway, watching from the doorway with Tuvok at her side, felt the temperature of the room drop as something ancient and furious tore free of its long captivity. Evacuate the level, she snapped to Tuvok, drawing her phaser as Windu and Sidious clashed in a blur of lightsaber and lightning that scored the walls and shattered the office's wide windows. Outward into the Coruscant night. The battle that followed was brief, brutal, and unlike anything Voyager's crew had witnessed. Sidious fighting with a ferocity that belied his age, Windu matching him with the discipline of a lifetime's mastery. Until Yoda himself entered the fray, small green frame moving with a speed that defied every expectation his stature suggested. It ended not in death, but in defeat. Sidious cornered, his power finally exhausted against the combined strength of two Jedi masters who refused to yield ground. His mask of statesmanship burned away, forever in the eyes of every witness who would carry word of what they'd seen this night. It's over, Windu said, breathing hard, lightsaber still humming at Sidious's throat. It is never over, Sidious rasped, something like satisfaction curling beneath his defeat. You have only delayed the inevitable. Master Jedi. The Republic was already dying long before I arrived to hasten it. Janeway stepped forward into the wreckage of the office, phaser lowered but not holstered, watching a would-be emperor stripped of his mask and his moment both. Maybe, she said quietly, but it's not dying tonight. And that, for now, is enough. The days that followed Sidious's exposure moved with the strange, disorienting speed of a galaxy, readjusting itself around a truth it had never suspected it needed to know. The Senate convened in emergency session. Palpatine's decades of carefully cultivated public trust collapsed. Within hours as evidence, Seven and Dooku had assembled was laid bare before representatives who felt, in equal measure, betrayed and relieved. The Naboo blockade contingency, its activation trigger severed along with its architect's freedom, quietly dissolved before it ever drew Republic blood. Count Dooku surrendered himself to the Jedi Council's judgment. His testimony weighed against his complicity in a manner Janeway suspected would occupy Jedi philosophers for years to come, neither fully absolved nor fully condemned. A man who had chosen, in the end, to unmake the very weapon he'd helped forge. On Mandalore, Duchess Satine Kryze received word of Palpatine's fall with the particular relief of a ruler who understood, perhaps better than anyone, how close her world had come to being ground beneath the machinery of a war, engineered by a single hidden hand. Pre-Vizslas Death Watch, deprived of the galactic chaos that would have let their insurgency flourish unchecked, retreated to lick their wounds, a threat diminished. Though Satine knew better than to believe it extinguished, she sent Voyager's crew a formal message of gratitude, and a private one to Chakotay that carried a warmth neither of them chose to examine too closely before the ship's inevitable departure. Master Ciphodias returned to quiet Jedi service. The clone army he'd once been manipulated into commissioning now nothing more than an unrealized shadow of a future that would never come to pass. He would live, Janeway understood, though whether that life unfolded in peace or in some new, unforeseen danger remained beyond even Hugh's willingness to reveal. Aboard Voyager, the crew gathered, On the bridge, as the familiar shimmer of Q's arrival rippled through the air one final time, his expression, for once, carrying something almost like genuine respect beneath its habitual smugness. "Well, Captain," Q said, "I confess I expected you to fumble this rather more spectacularly. A galaxy saved, a Sith Lord unmasked, a Duchess's pacifism preserved without a single system reduced to ash. Almost makes a being. Wonder if mortals deserve more credit than I typically extend them." "Almost," Janeway said dryly. "Don't get used to the compliment." Q snapped his fingers with theatrical finality. "A deal is a deal, Catherine. Home, exactly as promised, not a second lost. No scar left on your timeline that you didn't choose to carry yourself." Space folded around Voyager in a silent, impossible rupture, and the storm-wrecked skies of Kamino, the crystal spires of Sundari, and the endless towers of Coruscant fell away behind a curtain of light, replaced, in the span of a heartbeat, by the familiar blue marble of Earth turning peacefully beneath a Starfleet sky, precisely where their long, impossible journey had first begun. The Force would remember what had passed above Kamino's storms. Voyager's crew, changed by choices no starship's mission ever prepared them for, would remember too, carrying home not just the relief of return, but the quiet knowledge that somewhere, in a galaxy far, far away, a future had been rewritten by hands that had chosen compassion over convenience, and courage over the comfortable silence of doing nothing at all.